It is Money Monday. Renters make up more than a half of the population in Seattle. That's according to Rent Cafe. And also in a new report, Rent Cafe says Seattle is one of the best cities on the West Coast for renters, coming in at number 9. It scored high for quality of life and the strongest economy for renters. But how do you know that renting is what is best for you, or should you be looking to own a home? Well, financial expert Tori Dunlap of her First 100K is joining me now. Thank you for being with us, Tori.
Thank you.
We'll talk all things rent or buy.
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic.
I think it's an interesting topic if you have the money to choose, right?
Exactly.
I think that for the average person in Seattle, a $900,000 house is not in financial reach. So I think that, we're going to talk today about the pros and cons for both, but I always have to acknowledge right off the bat that for most people, this is not a choice. You rent because that's the only option you have.
Right. So how do we know, and why is buying a house not always the best financial decision for people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you were taught this. I was taught like money is, getting thrown into the drain if you rent, right? It's getting thrown down the drain. It's a waste of money. And again, especially in the olden days when homeownership was more accessible, that might have been a little more true. But I rented for a really long time. I love being a renter. It's so great to know that, like, okay, I can call somebody if something happens. And homeownership right now is not a guaranteed investment. We were just talking about a friend of yours who just bought a condo, and like to own a condo in Seattle right now, it actually doesn't feel like a good time. It's expensive to be a homeowner. It's not just the mortgage, it's all of the additional expenses. It's the upkeep, it's the gardening, it's the
HOA.
It's the HOA, a pipe burst, right? So renting is not throwing away money. It's actually an investment and a lot of financial flexibility.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why a lot of people are doing it.
Totally.
And which is also totally okay. But how do you know if you are financially ready to make that purchase of maybe your first home or an investment property?
Yeah, I think, again, the first thing is to ask yourself, do I actually want this? Or is it just what I've been told I should do? So that's the first thing, is like, do you actually want to buy a house? The second thing we want to consider is having an emergency fund. We've talked about that every single week on this show, but 3 to 6 months of living expenses, making sure you have that before you even think about what is the additional money I have for a down payment. We also want to have a stable job. We want to increase our credit score, do anything we can to make the mortgage less expensive. And you also want to think about, okay, what can I afford in addition if something happens, the kind of maintenance of the house too.
Yeah, there's that term house poor.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people talk about that.
Yeah.
Maybe that is why you don't want to rent, is because you don't want to put all your money into that one basket in case something does happen.
Yeah, exactly.
I know there's a lot of stigma around renting, which is sad long term, because there shouldn't be.
Nope.
It's each person's choice. But what are the perks of renting? I know you touched on some of that you have someone to call to help you with maybe a light that went out, or something even worse than that.
Oh, I remember moving into the most recent place I rented, and the toilet was overflowing, and that got to be a call to somebody else. So like, that's a huge amount of flexibility. I also think that, again, being all of your eggs in that one basket, you don't have the opportunity to potentially invest in the stock market in the same way. And that's something that I was able to do, is use my money to grow in other investments. I think that flexibility is huge. It's also, again, no surprise costs, and somebody else gets to handle it. You have more freedom to put your money elsewhere with those investments. And then also, it's just so important to understand, like, it has to fit the season of your life. And when I, moved to Seattle from Tacoma when I was in my 20s, like, I didn't want to buy a house, and nor could I afford a house in Seattle, but I was like, I want to rent. I want to, focus my priorities on other things besides yard work.
Yeah, which is absolutely okay. Yeah. And then you can make the decision when you are ready to for that. So how do you make that decision without having guilt or pressure over it?
Yeah, I think it is, you have to figure out if that is truly what you want. I've told this story on my own podcast before, but my well-intentioned parents were trying to convince me that I needed to be a homeowner in order to, be financially successful. And it was the best decision I ever made. I actually backed out of purchasing a condo the day before closing. And it was the best decision, because I would have been living, 20 minutes from my parents, which would have been great for them and not so great for me. But that was all that I could afford. I would have been commuting into the city. It would have been just a very different life. And so it wasn't fitting the season of my life at that time. And so I think that there's so many aspects of this to consider that are beyond just financial, but emotional. Do you want this? Is this something that fits your life, fits your goals? And that's just as important, I would argue, sometimes more than if it makes financial sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great tips right there. And I know we can talk more and more about this, but where can people learn more about these tips and maybe make that decision for themselves?
Yeah, Financial Feminist is the name of my podcast. It's the #1 money podcast for women in the world. And we've helped millions of women be better with money, but it's for anybody anybody of any gender identity. And we have multiple episodes on homeownership, on renting versus buying. So it's a great resource.
Yes, absolutely. And follow her on Instagram too.
Thank you.
Tori, thank you so much for your time today. Always great to learn more from you. And hopefully these tips help someone who's watching right now too.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Tori.